If you ever hear of a food so delicious that people fight over it, be careful. Some foods have secrets, dark secrets. This is the story of Mama Binta, a woman whose pepper soup became famous across the land, but at a terrible cost. Mama Binta was a struggling food seller in a small African town, where the aroma of various foods mingled with the sounds of traders. Mama Binta's pepper soup shop stood quietly in a corner. Her shop used to be full of customers, but lately, newer and more fancy food shops opened in her area, and nobody comes to hers. She tried everything, adding more spices, lowering her prices, but nothing worked, and only a few loyal customers remained. The wooden tables were mostly empty, and her large cooking pot sat half full, the spices settling at the bottom. Hunger and sadness filled her tiny home. One evening, as she sat outside her empty shop, watching as customers flocked to newer shops, their colorful umbrellas dotting the landscape like butterflies avoiding her corner of the market, her husband, Kofi, arrived from work. Kofi was a mortuary attendant, and he had seen strange things in his time. He noticed her growing despair. Each evening, he would return home to find her counting fewer and fewer coins. One particularly difficult evening, Mama Binta sat in her shop worrying over her almost failed business. Kofi pulled up a stool, sat, and whispered, "Mama Binta, I have an idea. The old people say the water used to wash the dead has powers. If you use it in your soup, nobody will be able to resist it. Every evening, before I lock up, you could come and collect some water. Just a small amount to mix with your soup base. Nobody would know." Mama Binta gasped. "What kind of talk is this, Kofi?" "But what about the spirits?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kofi waved away her concerns. "The dead understand hunger. They know the pain of watching your child go without food. Besides, we will use only a little, and I will say prayers to appease them." Mama Binta wasn't convinced, but as the days passed and her shop remained empty, her desperation grew. That night, she followed Kofi to the mortuary. When no one was watching, he filled a covered bucket with the sacred water and handed it to her. His eyes darting nervously around the empty compound. "Use it," he said. "Let's see what happens." The next morning, as the sun rose, Mama Binta cooked her pepper soup with the special water. The effect was immediate. As it bubbled, a strong, sweet aroma filled the air. It spread through the streets, reaching every corner of the village. The usual spices seemed to dance differently in the broth, creating a fragrance that made her dizzy with desire. Then something strange happened. Now, before we continue, if you have watched up until now, it is because you enjoyed the story. Please be kind enough to give this video a like, drop your comments, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Now back to the story. People came running to her shop. They sat, ate, and begged for more. Their eyes widened with delight. They couldn't stop eating. Her wooden benches could no longer hold all the people who came. People who once ignored her food now fought to be served first. The wives in the village grew angry. Their husbands spent all their money at Mama Binta's shop. They stopped eating at home. Some men even sold their properties to buy more pepper soup. News of the soup spread. People traveled from other villages just to taste it. They said the soup made them feel powerful. Some claimed it gave them strange dreams, where they spoke to dead relatives. Others said they could never forget the taste, it followed them, haunted them. Mama Binta's business boomed. Her shop became the busiest place in town. The business grew so big that Mama Binta hired help. But she never let anyone near her special pot where she mixed the soup base with mortuary water. Every evening, she would close her shop early to collect the water from her husband. But trouble was coming. One day, Mama Binta went to the market to buy meat. The butcher shook his head when he saw her. "No meat today, Mama Binta," he said. "The whole town is struggling. The suppliers haven't brought anything in weeks." She frowned. "How can there be no meat at all?" Another food seller, Mama turned, overheard and walked over. "Oh, Mama Binta, you are asking about meat. But your shop never runs out. What is your secret?" Other sellers gathered, nodding. "Yes. We all have empty pots, but your soup is always full. Where do you get your meat?" Mama Binta forced a smile. "Hard work and luck, my friends." Mama turned scoffed. "Hard work. Luck. Huh. Tell us the real secret." "Maybe she has a special supplier," another vendor whispered. "She must be hiding something," said a third. The gossip spread like wildfire. While other food sellers sat idle with no meat to sell, Mama Binta's shop was always full. The villagers grew suspicious, but no one could prove anything. The wives of the village were furious. Their husbands no longer ate at home. The women gathered under the baobab tree to discuss their problem. "This woman is destroying our homes," Amina shouted. "My husband won't eat my food anymore." "You are not alone," Halima added. "Mine even mumbles about her soup in his sleep." "What is in that soup?" Saad asked, shaking her head. "We must stop her," Fatu declared. "Let's go to the government." The next morning, they stormed the government office, shouting their complaints. An official stepped forward, rubbing his forehead. "What exactly is the issue?" "Our husbands no longer eat at home. That woman's pepper soup has taken them from us," Amina cried. The official chuckled. "Is she forcing them to eat there?" "No, but there is something strange about that soup," Halima argued. "People say it gives them dreams of the dead." Another official leaned back in his chair. "And what do you want us to do?" "Arrest her for making delicious food." "Ban her shop," Fatu insisted. "She is ruining families." The officials exchanged glances. One of them sighed and said, "Ladies, we cannot punish a woman for running a successful business. If your husbands prefer her food, then perhaps you should improve your own cooking." The women gasped in outrage. "This is not about cooking. There is witchcraft in that soup," Halima shouted. But the officials only laughed. "Unless you bring proof of wrongdoing, there is nothing we can do." The women left fuming. But Mama Binta's troubles were only beginning. Other business owners grew suspicious. While everyone struggled to find meat during meat scarcity, Mama Binta never ran out. No matter the meat shortage, her soup pot was always full. The truth. Kofi had been bringing her something else, human flesh. What people didn't know was that Kofi was cutting meat from dead bodies in the mortuary. At the mortuary, unclaimed bodies lay in silence. And Kofi, desperate to keep his wife's business going, found another way to provide meat. He took it from the dead and brought it home. When grieving families complained about missing parts from their dead relatives, he would blame it on rats or tell them bodies naturally shrink after death. He had excuses ready. No one suspected Mama Binta. Mama Binta's shop became a war zone. Every day, customers lined up before dawn, fighting to be served first. One day, two men, Idris and Kwame, found themselves in a heated argument. "I was here first," Idris growled, grabbing the last bowl of soup. "You lie," Kwame shouted, snatching it from him. In seconds, punches flew. Idris knocked Kwame into a pot of boiling soup. The crowd gasped. But instead of crying, Kwame did something shocking. He dipped his fingers into the hot soup, licked them, and moaned. "Even the pain is worth it." The people stared in awe. Mama Binta only smiled. "There will be more tomorrow," she assured them. And the fight ended. Just like that. One day, the village's eldest man, Baba Okoro, passed away. He was a respected chief who lived for over 100 years. His funeral was delayed, and the town's meat supply ran low. Mama Binta needed meat. Kofi suggested using meat from the old chief's body. His flesh would be powerful, Kofi whispered to his wife. Think of all the wisdom in his body. That night, Kofi brought home a piece of Baba Okoro's body. She chopped it, threw it into the pot, and set it to boil. But something was different this time. The meat refused to soften. Hours passed, yet it remained as tough as stone. But the smell, the smell, was stronger than ever. It filled the air, calling people to the shop. A crowd gathered. "Mama Binta, serve us," they cried. "The meat is not ready," she said. But the people wouldn't leave, they waited for hours. Her firewood ran out, and finally, she decided to serve it as it was. She scooped a piece of meat into a bowl and handed it to a man in the front row. He raised the spoon to his lips. Then, the meat spoke. A deep, ghostly voice rumbled from the pot. "So this is where my flesh has ended up. Mama Binta, why have you done this?" Chaos broke out. People ran out of the shop screaming. Some vomited. Others fainted. The crowd screamed. People ran in every direction. Some fell, some tripped over chairs. The shop shook as the voice grew louder. Mama Binta's hands trembled. She tried to gather her money and flee, but the villagers caught her. They discovered her husband's row too. They tore her shop apart, screaming in horror. The village elders cursed and banished both of them. The village elders gathered. "This couple is cursed," they said. "They must leave this town." As they walked away from the village, carrying only what they could hold, the voices started. Day and night, they heard the cries of all the dead people whose bodies they had disrespected. That night, as she disappeared into the darkness, she still heard them, the whispers of the dead, calling her, haunting her. Their daughter, Binta, was sent to live with relatives, but people called her the child of the body cookers for the rest of her life. Years later, travelers would tell stories of a mad couple who wandered from village to village. The woman was always stirring an empty pot, while the man walked behind her, apologizing to the air. They say even today, any cook who tries to use evil means to succeed will hear their story as a warning. And so, the legend of Mama Binta lived on. Beware of food that tastes too good. You may never know what it is made of, or who it once was. Now before we continue, if you have watched up until now, it is because you enjoyed the story. Please be kind enough to give this video a like, drop your comments, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Now back to the story.